I'm Randall Franks, and it's Sacred Sounds Fridays live on WBFC. And I'm here with Curly Seckler, Bluegrass Hall of Fame member, and such a wonderful man because he's one of my favorite people. Curly, how are you today?
I'm really great, and it's good to see you, my good man.
It's good to be with you, and of course we've been friends for many years.
Many years. Yeah, you're right. Now you're not that old.
But most of my musical life we have known one another, and you have blessed me with your music, and more than that, with the kindness and the encouragement that you've given me through the years, as you took the time as a professional musician to just share a bit of your life with me, and that made a big impression and encouragement for me.
Well, to me, it's been a great honor down through the years of knowing you. You know, so many times I've had some things where I call you about coming to fiddle for me on some shows, and every time something would come up and you'd have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I always hated that. We never have did a show together much, have we?
That's true. The only time we didn't play together then, but the closest I guess we ever came was many years ago. You came down and played the Peach Blossom Bluegrass Festival in Marietta, Georgia for WRFG, and I got to be your I guess you would call it your host that day.
Yeah.
For this radio station, because I was on the radio station.
Yeah, well, that's great.
But our group played on the show. If I remember correctly, we were on just before y'all were on my Peachtree Pickers back many years ago. But let's tell the folks a little bit about your career. And of course, you started out coming from China Grove,
North Carolina in 1939.
and you and your brothers played together.
So we played together before I left home. When I left home, I took a four-string banjo, a tenor banjo, with me when I went to work with Charlie Monroe. In 1939, I come out of that cotton patch, and that's been it with the cotton patch.
So it was an improvement.
Improvement, yeah. But it was hard road to weed. But there was some rough times, and it got to be some good times, thank the good Lord. But it took a lot of years for me to ever make enough to eat on.
We were, when working with Doc Tommy Scott on his autobiography, when I was working with him to write that, of course, I got to learn a lot more about your career, especially the time you spent with him. Of course, you and he got together with Charlie Monroe initially as you both helped make up the Kentucky Partners.
That's when I first met Tommy. He was with Charlie Monroe, and that was back in '39. And I first met him in Wheeling, West Virginia, on barn dance they had there. I don't remember just what they called that, barn dance, but that's when I first met Tommy Scott, and he come up with the Kentucky Partners. And we worked there for quite a while, and then moved from there over to WHAS in Louisville, Kentucky. And we worked over there on some early morning programs, real early.
What time in the morning did you have to get up to do those?
Well, it's around 5 o'clock.
Were the people up listening to you at 5 o'clock?
I don't know. I don't know. I know we had to get up and do the programs, I know that.
Yeah.
But what happened there, of course, Charlie had mentioned in Wheeling about how would we like to go try out for the Opry. Back then, you had to try out for the Opry in front of the solemn old judge. And of course, I said, it's all right with me. I said, if you want to go down there, we'll do it. But then we waited around for several weeks there, and we was listening to the Saturday night Opry. All at once, here come the solemn old judge on. Well, we've got a Kentucky man here with us tonight, Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. And Charlie said, well, he just beat us there a couple weeks. It might have been Charlie in the WSM instead of Bill.
Could have been.
But Bill beat Charlie in there. It was about 2 or 3 weeks.
You, of course, at that time, you didn't record with Charlie at that point. You recorded with him. You went back with him. A little
Yeah,
later
I
and
worked with
recorded.
Charlie so 3 different times, I think it was. I first started recording with Charlie in '46. I think we was in Charlotte, North Carolina at that time.
Were there any gospel songs that you recorded with him that you recall?
No Depression in Heaven
Mhm.
was one of them, and Mother's Not Dead, She's Only Sleeping. You know, we went to record that number there, and it's Mother's Not Dead, She's Only Sleeping. Well, when we got to that word sleeping, Charlie said, you're not phrasing that word just right. I said, how do you want it? He said, Mother's not dead, she's only a-sleeping. I said, in other words, you want the ing on the end of it. Well, you listen to that record, and that ing is on it. Mother's not dead, she's only a-sleeping. But he puts that on a lot of his words on some of his songs. He believed in doing it that way. I said, it's okay with me, so that's the way we put it.
He wanted the enunciation of that last.
That's right.
last,
He wanted it to ing on the end of it.
Of course, well, before that, you and Tommy left Charlie and went out on your own with your own tent show, and y'all were doing radio shows.
That's right.
And recorded together.
Over at Spartanburg, South Carolina. Well, we first went to Augusta, Georgia, and then left Augusta, and then Doc put us on a program there on Spartanburg, South Carolina then, me and Tommy.
Yeah. Y'all, so of course we're blessed to have some of the recordings y'all did together back then that were released on album, and they're still available, and we'll probably listen to one of those songs, but that was some pretty tough brother duet material that
Well,
you were doing back then.
it was. Back then, of course, when I went to work with Charlie, he called me Smiling Bill. You'll get as close to Bill Monroe as he could, you know. And of course, I said okay, you know, back then. But then when I left Charlie, then me and Tommy started using that same phrase with it. Well, then Charlie wanted to stop it, which we did. We stopped it, and then I went back to Curly. But then after that, from then on, when I recorded with him, it's Curly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we give up that Monroe Bill name.
Yeah. So you went from there. Of course, you also worked with the Sauceman Brothers.
Right. Carl and J.P. Sauceman. 2 of the finest young men that you'd ever want to know to work with. They were really great people, and we had some good songs, and we did some good singing together. Mm-hmm. I've just always hated that back then, that of course they wasn't doing no recording at the years that I was with them. And nobody was doing any recording hardly for a while.
It's because of that moratorium during the war, I think.
That's what it was, and we never did do no recording, but we did record some stuff to use there at the station when we was out on the road. And I got a few numbers off of it, and I've got 1 or 2, I think it is, on one of my CDs.
Yeah. I think 70 years in bluegrass or 60 years.
60 years in bluegrass. Yeah, I've got Shine, Shine on Me or something, I think is the title of it. But we had some good singing. Joe Stewart was a good bass man and a great guitar picker. And J.P. was a good baritone singer. And Carl was a great man for leading gospel numbers or any other number. And of course I throwed my party. I just throwed it in there.
Well,
but they was good people to work with.
That's an understatement when it comes to your tenor singing, Curly, because pretty much when it comes to the bluegrass tenor sound, you wrote the book. For a lot of people in our industry, your tenor singing is what they learned and patterned after. I know that's my case. For a lot of years, I sounded like a weak Curly Seckler when I tried to sing tenor. But because I listened to so many of the Flatt and Scruggs recordings that you sang on.
I'll tell you, when I first went to record with Lester, when we moved from Mercury Records to Columbia Records, Don Law, of course, was the A&R man. And we was in there doing some singing together. And now Lester told me this. I didn't hear Don say this. But Lester told me that Don punched his little finger at him and told him to come in, I want to talk to you a little bit. And he said, where in the world, Lester, did you get him? He said, well, he's worked with this one, that, and the other, and Charlie Monroe, and some of them. He said, I'll tell you one thing, don't never let him get away. He's got one powerful voice. And said, leave him loud. If you notice all of our Columbia records, and I'm on them, you'll hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that's what Don said, Don Long, that he's got a powerful voice, and don't never let him get away.
You know, a lot of it, that's sort of like gospel music in the sense of the old quartet music. What people heard was either the high tenor or the bass vocals. You know, you either had a real strong bass or a real strong tenor or both. And that's sort of that philosophy. It's the tenor that stands out in a vocal trio or in a duet.
I know what Lester said when I first come to work with him. He said, now I sing awful high. But he says, if I ever get a number too high for you, just tell me and we'll lower it one key. Well, I worked all them years till the day we laid him to rest. I never did ask him to lower a song in my life. I just went wherever he wanted to go. I think some of them was too high back in the early years, but he was the one that was writing the check.
Now of course, you were with Flatt and Scruggs for a little over a decade, and then you went off the road for a while. Is that correct?
I worked with him a while, and then I got out.
You went with Jim and Jesse in there.
Yeah, I went back with Jim and Jesse and recorded with them on their first release on Capitol Records.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they first recorded one of my numbers, Purple Hearts. And I'll never forget what Ken Nelson said. He was the man then of Capitol Records. We was in Nashville, Tennessee, going to record. And Jim or Jesse one said I had a number called Purple Heart. Well, back then he said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want no songs about no wars right now. I just don't want to hear it. Jim says, well, I think you better listen to this one. He said, all right. So we sung a little bit of it, and he said, stop, we'll record that. Yeah. So that's the first time it was recorded with Jim and Jesse. It was Purple Heart.
It's a beautiful song. It certainly is.
Yeah.
And of course, you've updated that in recent years. I've heard you sing it with sort of a, I guess so you could place it in current time. So it's not just about the Korean War anymore. It's
yeah, I say overseas now on it. I've recorded it several times.
Yeah. Of the songs that you recorded with Flatt and Scruggs, were there any particular gospel songs that you particularly liked that stuck out in your mind?
Like I said, one of the finest ones I thought that we did back in them earlier years was Reunion in Heaven. Mm-hmm. To me, that was my pick of song, and that just put me up yonder. But back then I had no trouble reaching it. Of course, today I'd have to get on a stool. Yeah.
Well,
but I enjoyed most of our gospel songs. You know, what would knock me out, you know, I don't know why. Well, I know why they did it, but why they didn't record some gospel albums. But Lester always said, well, they don't play it on Sunday. You know, and he was just, that was just his idea on it, that it never would get played if it's gospel. Well, today, gospel is just as hard as anything else, to me. And of course, I've got no room to talk. Look at the albums I've put out since then, and I don't have a gospel album out yet.
But you've always included gospel on
I've
every
always
album you
did 4 gospel numbers on any program that I've ever did, back when I was on the road.
Of course, when you had the Nashville Grass, you recorded. You had Betty Jean Robinson with you.
Right.
Of course, she's went on and continued having a large career in gospel music through the years.
Yeah, well, I did a gospel album there with her, you know.
Yeah.
But not just mine.
Right.
But she was a wonderful lady and just a great singer, Betty Jean was.
Yeah.
And she is still to this day.
Yes.
She's a wonderful person, a wonderful lady, and a great singer.
What period of your life would you say was that you enjoyed the most, as far as with the performing? Which act? Is there one you enjoyed more than the other, or was there a time that was more enjoyable?
Well, I've enjoyed working with Jim and Jesse, way back in the early years before I ever went to work with Lester and Earl. But there was an honor to work with them through the years, off and on. And with the Sauceman Brothers, I enjoyed working with those two people, J.P. and Carl. You couldn't find no finer people to work with, and good singers. And of course, then I'd drift with Charlie, and work off and on with him. And he was a straight man when it come to working. He didn't peddle around with this, that, and the other. When Charlie said we're going to do that, that's exactly what we would do. He wouldn't say we're going to do it at 10 o'clock and then show up at 11 to do it. We did it at 10 o'clock. And he was a heck of a nice fellow to work with, Charlie was. But like I say, there's been no bad ones that I ever worked with, except, well, we won't go into that.
Well,
you know what I was going to say.
Well, we've had with so many of the different people that you perform with, I know that there is a fond memories, and there's some rough times, rough patches of the road. But the one thing about it is, I know through it all, the good Lord has led you through and made things.
That's right. I tell you, I have stuck with the Lord, a lot of years. I know in 78, I was baptized in 78 in Smyrna, Tennessee, at the First Baptist Church over there. And Lester was still with us at that time. Of course, he passed away in 79. And he was in the church when I was baptized. All right, our bus driver was with us there at that time, Toby Searcy. And he said when I went down under the water and come up, he said he tapped my knee and told me, he said he ducked a good one. But I've lived it since then, but I wasn't a bad egg before then. But you better get the eggs in your basket right. I'll put it that way. And that's been that straight road ever since 78 with me, with the Lord. And I thank Him every day for the wife and what I have accomplished in gospel singing and bluegrass music. It has blessed me in every way under the sun. I've made a good and honest living with it. I don't think, and I know, I've never took a nickel in my house that I didn't deserve. And I appreciate the Lord for that.
Well, that's a perfect comment to end on, and I thank you, Curly, for being with me, and thank you all for visiting with us on Sacred Sounds Fridays Live and Randall Franks Television. We appreciate you tuning in and visiting with Curly Seckler, one of my great friends and one of the finest men that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing.
Friends, I hope you've enjoyed this visit with Curly Seckler. If you'd like to learn more, in my book, Encouragers 1, Finding the Light, Curly shares an in-depth interview about his entire career. I hope you'll check that out at randallfranks.com. That's Encouragers 1, Finding the Light.